Oh, hello everyone. My name is Eric Nijveld, co-founder of technologycatalog.com. Today's webinar will be delivered by Michael Diorio, VP Industry Solutions at TRUApp. The webinar will last about 30 minutes. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box on the left-hand side. The webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link after the webinar, and feel free to share the link with your colleagues. And I would now like to hand over to Michael. Michael, over to you.
Eric, thank you very, very much. I appreciate the opportunity here. So a new way to generate cost savings and elevate decision-making within complex maintenance and asset integrity field operations. Next. So as I laid out on the invite, if we could go and switch over to the next slide. As I pointed out in the invite, and you had so generously shared on your social media platform, what I'll do is I'll hit upon the three key themes within maintenance and asset integrity field ops at large producers that are carrying 7 or 8 figures of unnecessary costs per field per year. And so those three things, as we see on the slide, are breaking the cycle, gaining clarity, securing a foundation for the future. But in the interest of time, what I'll do here is I'll just cover these in broad strokes. And if anything is of particular interest, as Eric said at the outset of the webinar here, please note it, and we can feel free to cover it at the Q&A at the 30-minute mark, or we can just set aside a time to talk about it further. But if we can switch to the next slide here. I thought that a great place to start here would be to talk a little bit, prior to getting into those three areas, I thought it'd be useful to share a little bit about how TRUApp came to be and how we're uniquely qualified to be able to share these cost savings insights that we're going to cover here today. So first, TRUApp was formed when the CEO of a private group of private investors purchased an oil field from a super major on the North Slope of Alaska. And this field was actually deemed unworkable. It was actually not profitable because it contained infrastructure and operations that were developed for far more production than what was originally anticipated. The actual reservoir dropped to around 1,200 or so barrels a day from a high of around 17,000. So this field was operating at a loss. And the lead investors and their ops manager were very, very forward thinking, and they saw an opportunity here. You see, because they were heavily experienced in oil and gas ops and running fields on the Alaska North Slope. And they knew that if they replicated what BP had actually done with the field, that it would never work financially. So with necessity being the mother of invention, what they did is they took a chance. And they took a chance on developing a system with us that simplified and replaced the archaic systems being used to run the facility at that point. And this was done in consideration of their need to be able to contend with the integrated oil and gas infrastructure of the wells, the pipeline, and the plant, where, downtime could cost millions. So the idea was to build an integrated system that was work order driven. And what it could do is it could simplify and streamline the breadth and depth of technologies being used to run the field. So they partnered with our sister company, who had been a software development firm in Alaska that had been in operation since 1998. And together, over a period of 3 years, what they did is they built an integrated web-based system for tracking information on a wide range of field operations at the oil field. And the goal was to simply run the day-to-day management of an asset. So to make a long story short, by actually building this tech, which then turned into TRUApp, the independent investors, what they did is they fundamentally changed the economics of the field operations while safely generating a tremendous cost savings, and they ultimately sold it. And just to kind of give you an idea, the annual cost savings in labor was around 27 million a year, and over the 3 years it was around 82 million in savings. And upon the exit, they had also saved about 34 million in tech licensing fees by kind of taking away all of the peripheral tech that wasn't necessary. So we're looking at a 3-year total operational cost savings on this initial project of around $116 million. Now, this was in 2012. The field has since been sold and it's since been acquired twice since then. And TRUApp remains in use to this day. So even with the new owners, and we have an organization have also grown and we've also improved it. So if you can switch to the next slide, please. So all of the large oil and gas producers that we work with, they have complex asset management operations and they have a tech stack with varied configurations. Typically, this will be a mix, but it's always best in class software. There's always the proven vendors. We're talking about an ERP with asset management modules. We're talking about the CMMS. We're talking about EAM systems, SAP, Maximo, Infor, all of those. And as we know, this works. I mean, the work's actually getting done. Assets are being maintained. Energy is being produced. But you're here today to learn about a new way to generate cost savings and elevate the decision-making within your complex maintenance and asset integrity field operations. And what's unique about this new way that we're going to cover is that it's rooted in a multi-billion-dollar problem that, frankly, we have found has been overlooked within the industry. And it's very, very straightforward. You know, we all know that data integration is a costly problem, but what's not well known are the implications of this in consideration of the existing tech stack that supports most producers and AI. You know, it's very much common knowledge that enterprise tech used at the company or at the corporate level, like an ERP and its modules, like I said, or a CMMS, they really weren't designed for use in the field. And even if they were, if they've made some tweaks, their lack of usability, it almost always, in our experience, which is very, very deep and wide over the course of 11 or so years, it's had significant issues regarding end user adoption. See, these tools were typically designed really for management level use outside of those quote unquote power users. And management often doesn't see the implications of this usability problem in the field. So therefore, management typically isn't fully aware of the depth of the problem related to the communication between the teams and the actual amount of work that's involved in constantly managing that flow of information across multiple systems. Next, please. So how are teams in the field like maintenance and asset integrity managing these communications to fill in these enterprise system gaps? And the answer is that their people in the field are using shadow systems, and they're using a lot, which then require a lot of manual effort. So if you want to think about Excel spreadsheets, which are typically loaded with macros or chat or messaging apps or emails, both personal and work, or document and file sharing apps, ad hoc reports, things like folders on the desktops, shared drives, flash drives, databases, custom services, point solutions. We're kind of wrapping all of those up to call them shadow systems because they're a practical and they're a creative way, there's no doubt, to be able to unlock the requirements for the execution of work that the enterprise systems simply do not provide to the people in the field. So again, in this sense, the work's getting done. They're using all of these peripheral spot solution shadow systems. But the question is this: is it really being done in the safest, most effective, and efficient manner? And in our experience, it's not by a long shot. And therein lies the new opportunity. Next. So breaking the cycle. This is the area where we're talking about reversing the outdated, inefficient workflows and the cost controls that are embedded within maintenance and asset integrity. Where the opportunity exists, it all resides in innovation. I mean, like any business competency, things evolve. And subsurface tech, if we were to just do an analogy, has continuously evolved to be able to find oil and to be able to bring it to the surface. But where we come into the picture here is, what about the tech that's used for the field, for the skilled personnel that's out there, quote unquote, turning the wrenches? And I'm talking about any advancements, any innovation that's going to simplify and optimize how critical information is retrieved, how data is documented, and how work is executed each day by highly skilled employees and contractors. Those three things. And in this capacity, whether you're a large producer or small, regardless of the tech spend on enterprise software, we've seen that time and time again, when you look closely, if you look really closely at the process of what's being done in the field, producers still rely heavily upon paper. They're using spreadsheets and all of those point solutions that I said within their work streams, their day-to-day, to be able to execute and document the work that they're doing. So these tools, so yes, there's tools that certainly exist to be able to remove paper or to be able to remove some spreadsheets, but were they built for the field as a whole? Or were they built just for the departmental level? And that's a key question, because, you know, departmental level, and analogy for M&AI could be the CMMS. And there's countless systems like this for every department across the field. And the challenge with this is that each department within field ops, like maintenance and asset integrity, naturally maintains an expert or a more narrow view of their work. Again, this is completely logical because each department requires specialization by nature of the business. But this specialized approach, okay, however, it's really prevented anyone from having that holistic, that complete view of operations and personnel that also touch the critical discipline within field operations like maintenance and asset integrity. And it's this lack of transparency that generates inaccurate, it generates inconsistent data. It's countless points of data redundancy. It overwhelms unaware IT groups of all of these peripheral shadow systems that they don't know how to manage and control. And as a result, it's increased overhead costs at each asset and collectively across the enterprise. So I guess to basically sum that up, you can have the best tools departmentally, but it does not make you as productive as you could be or profitable because of a fundamental lack of operability between the departments. Next, please. Now, this lack of interoperability, results in a large amount of non-productive time, NPT, and it's being invested because the people in the field, they need to chase down data, reports, documentation, materials, vendors. They need to do training to be able to do their day-to-day job. It's a very costly scenario that unfolds daily, in part because there's a serious gap in understanding the nuances involved in the execution of work in the field. And the key point is this: it's about the nuance of the perceived amount of time a task or job should take to complete versus the actual time involved when considering the safe and proper work delivery and its required documentation. And this chasing down of information is required for that because field personnel in M&AI and other areas, they have no easy way of discerning the breadth of the elements associated with the execution of work. Things like who are all the departments and personnel involved in this task? How does everyone work individually and work with one another on this task? What information, the data, documentation, training, etc., do they need to be able to safely perform their job when doing work affiliated with the core functional tasks within an area like maintenance and asset integrity. You know, when do you need to access this information within your daily work stream in support of doing those core functions? Why is this information needed at that specific point in the process? So like what happens after you're actually done the work? Who does it get handed off to and why? And where are you getting all of this information you need to do your job? Like what systems or meetings are needed to gather this material, to gain approvals, to search for, to enter and check information, to prepare internal reports, etc. And where do you record the work that you completed? And then how do you manage this on an ongoing basis? Keep it all up to date, whether it be digitally or manually. Those are key questions and a big, big part of the problem. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do here is I'd like to go over an example. And we're going to talk about something simple, a very simple one, this O-ring visual. And what this visual illustrates is the areas involved in the capture of the financial, regulatory, compliance, safety materials, and HR data, all associated with changing an O-ring on a high pressure gas compressor. And if you just consider the volume of systems here, we're looking at 10. And this is basically in a broad stroke that this one task, quote unquote, touches, along with the number of files and programs being utilized within there to be able to capture and retrieve this data. It really shines a light on the bigger problem here. You know, again, the data is being captured, but it's being captured within spreadsheets or some other standalone spot systems or disconnected apps within each of those areas. And this begs the question, what if you could streamline, what if you could automate the associated workflows and centralize the required data and all of its, accompanying documentation for the job so that the same O-ring replacement went from 12 hours, which is shown on this graphic, and did it in 2. Now, there isn't any magic here. There's no shortcuts. To gain 10 hours of cost savings on this one task, you need to break the process down to this level of detail, of this level of granularity. Otherwise, the costs remain hidden. And they're simply attributed to a cost of doing business, and they're not given much thought or scrutiny. Next slide. So what makes TRUApp so unique is that we've been getting this level of detail in the field every day for over 10 years now. And our job is to learn and to be obsessed with the details so that we can automate and make our clients' workflow better in the field. And as a result of this, we know that the hidden costs associated with this one example that we just covered, they're actually embedded within thousands of tasks that take place across the field each day. So as you could imagine from that example of the 10 hours of cost savings associated with the O-ring, the cumulative effect on costs is absolutely immense. And nowhere is this more prevalent than in an AI. But no one enterprise system that's being used, like a CMMS or an ERP with its accompanying modules, or even a specialized departmental system, will be able to reduce this massive amount of non-productive time in the field, because the work being done on the front line demands that interconnectedness across departments, technologies, people, and process. So TRUApp was actually created to be able to address this head on. We did it at the Dami oil field, and we've improved it ever since. And to fix this fundamental issue, we first needed to work with our clients to address the root cause of the problem. Next. So this is the black box of field operations. And the root cause is that field operations are a black box. Maintenance and asset integrity and all the other departments in field operations, they represent a complex ecosystem where the essential components of the work delivery lifecycle, everything that's in the center there, play out each day. These are reflective of the inputs and the outputs that take place in the field. Yet no one in the organization has been able to see the complete inner workings within each of these individual inputs and outputs, let alone how all of them interconnect. So this leaves even the best producers with the best technology and talent operating with an incomplete picture of OpEx, and it's typically littered with unnecessary costs. So when we dig into this with our clients, it always sparks this sense of irony, because the field personnel and management, they all fully grasp the key components, those core components in the circle of the work delivery lifecycle that's inside the black box. That isn't a problem. The problem is that despite their innate understanding of these life cycle, disciplines, field personnel are unable to carry out the tasks within the life cycle, like retrieving critical data, documenting their efforts, doing it in one location as the work takes place. And this inefficiency highlights that structural disconnect within field operations technologies all across oil and gas. And it's just that inherently the tools used in the field, the tools intended to support work delivery, they contain high levels of departmental, informational, data, and cost isolation. As a result, they require manual synchronization to gain the complete picture. And quite simply, it's a work experience that was ripe for automation and reinvention. And it really demands subject matter expertise. Next, please. And it's this subject matter expertise that we've been able to accumulate over the past 11 years. We're over now 350,000 hours of R&D working with subject matter experts in the field to be able to understand their role, to be able to understand their core workflows, and how to optimize them with automation on the platform. And what we found is that leaders in oil and gas and in M&AI, they're now treating the execution of work like the strategic opportunity for improvement that it is. So when it comes to the use of these enterprise level systems, M&AI leaders, they know that when it comes to their use by personnel in the field, they contain functional gaps. And to fill these gaps, to execute their work in the field, they're using those aforementioned shadow systems or tool to ensure that they have the digital tools necessary to get the job done right and to be able to document it properly. And within maintenance and asset integrity, we found a tremendous amount of spreadsheets and other tools to support specialized software like inspection and management, maintenance, reliability and integrity, materials and corrosion, asset management, HSE. All of them need to be working together. And, but then that doesn't tell the whole story, because there's also the sub-disciplines of field operations that inevitably interface with maintenance and asset integrity. They also need aspects: labor management, material management, purchasing, financials, production, regulatory reporting. We could go on and on. So to be able to systematically reduce non-productive time, modern producers and their M&A departments, they require the ability to see all these components, departmental, positional, and their interdependencies right down to the core functional task. And without it, one's ability to monitor and make decisions and react and predict their asset management performance is going to be restricted. And then so is their ability to manage costs. And it's through the use of these shadow IT systems that your colleagues and teams are certainly leveraging a practical and creative way to be able to unlock the execution of work that the enterprise systems don't provide, but they're fundamentally flawed because each has a digital point of failure, because they aren't accessible by all that need it. And they aren't scalable, and they're difficult to search through. So how can you do a root analysis on an asset with such disparate sources of data? And if you can't do a root cause analysis, how can you continuously improve your management of assets and your maintenance and asset integrity program as a whole? Next. So this references here the McKinsey report here. And yet, the hard truth here is that most operators have not maximized the production potential of their assets. And the source of the oil and gas performance gap that they're referring to is the operational complexity of production and processing facilities, which is what we work with. And the control systems, the tools, and the trainings are falling short. This is what they said back in 2017. And all of this complexity translates into performance differences. And to raise the performance bar overall, they have to embrace analytics. And it's the analytics they're saying that are going to be able to fill the performance gaps that's holding back reduction. Next. Now, the emphasis on the McKinsey report, though, was on the hard data, the availability, the infrastructure, the analytics, the skills and teams, all of it coming from sensors. But they also mentioned two critical elements: redesigned work and governance, along with business-driven agility. And what we found is that these areas are the areas that are ripe for advancement. And specifically, I'm referring to institutional knowledge, that the subject matter expertise, have the wisdom, the quote unquote tribal or historical knowledge of certain assets. And this is critical. Okay, so, but the 200 billion that McKinsey accounted for didn't take this amount of performance gaps into consideration. They didn't consider these 7 areas and all of these areas that touch the problem. So if we can move to the next slide. So this now gets into the depth and breadth of cost savings, and considering all of the gaps between the enterprise systems and these specialized departmental systems, just how big of an additional performance gap are we talking about? How big is this opportunity for leading producers moving forward? Imagine if all of that subject matter expertise, in addition to all of the sensor data and everything that they're capturing now, was all within a single platform where everything's planned, coordinated, documented in a single centralized system with positional rights, assets, where data, documentation, materials, reporting, it's not siloed, it's accessible within the personal work stream of the field, personnel. This actually allows producers to have the visibility into the execution of work across the field, so they have a complete picture of OpEx, and so they have greater financial control over people, process, and tech, all within one tool. And what's great about TRUApp is that it replaces hundreds, or we've even seen thousands of shadow systems at one large producer. And it doesn't just mimic what those other systems or manual processes are in a, I don't know how you could say, tech manner. Rather, it optimizes them with the goal of making work flow better. We look at it as addition through subtraction. It's a single source of truth, with which we've all heard, but it's also a dramatically improved means to be able to communicate internally. So what we did is we went, digitized it all. We connected the core non-negotiable workflows across dozens of the departments. We dramatically reduced the non-productive time, and we permanently reduced our clients' field operational cost structure. So I know we're kind of running over a little bit here. I guess that I could basically wrap it up with the fact of this, Eric, that at the end of the day here, really everything ultimately comes down to this concept of energy E2O. E2O: enable work, orchestrate work, executing work. That's what we've actually done. We've partnered with a very, very large consulting firm. We're getting a lot of traction within the industry. I'd love to be able to go into this more, in depth here. As I started talking about it, I ran a little bit long, so my apologies. I wasn't able to get through everything. But if we could just scroll to the last slide there, and everyone could just get my contact info, that would be great. It's michael.dorio@TRUApp Energy
Yeah, Michael, thank you very much for this overview, and very impressive how it started in Alaska. I know you've supported multiple operators already. What's the say typical feedback that you get from your customers, and can you say something about give a bit of an indication of the cost savings?
Well, yeah, I mean, the feedback that we get has been very, very, favorable. I mean, we've been able to grow within very large organizations like ENI, and what we do is we just start small. And what we do is we're able to show that cost savings at a pilot program level. It's able to be tracked. It's able to be very, very clear. And so once they see that, then they have the confidence to be able to go and then use it within other areas also.
Excellent. And I can imagine that it requires a bit of convincing of the customers. So how do you convince them to start with your system? Because it's quite a new way of working.
Well, it is. Yeah, and that's actually a really great question, Eric. I mean, what we do to be able to convince them, it's not really us convincing them. It's more about them convincing themselves, because what we do is we take one aspect of what it is that they're doing in the field. That could be very, very costly. For instance, something like handling failures of equipment, so to speak. I'm just pulling anything off my head here. And it's like, what we'll do is we'll go and we'll look at the way they're doing it right now. What we will do is we'll walk through and understand the people that are involved, the process. We're going to understand their as is, and we lay it all out. And typically when we lay out and we show them what this looks like, what it actually looks like in the field that I spoke about in the earlier part of the presentation, it opens up people's eyes, because management is typically unaware of all of the people that are involved within a specific process, all of the areas, all of the systems, all of the redundant data entry, everything that's been done. And we visually map that out. And when you map it out, it's very, very simple for people that are running areas like maintenance and asset integrity to understand what all of their people cost. And they're able to say, hey, wait a second, this changing of an O-ring on a compressor, we thought that it took only a couple of hours. It's actually taking us 12. There's 10 hours of lost times. This extrapolates to X. Then what we do is we work with them to show them what the same process would look like within the integrated TRUApp platform. So we have their as is compared to their to be. And it's very, very clear what the cost savings will be. And because the system was actually designed in a modular fashion, what we're able to do is we're able to roll it out, as I said, have that value translated directly to the bottom line. Then they have the confidence that, hey, this actually works. And then we build on that. And it's just a constantly gradual and accretive process of where we're rolling out module after module after module. And when we do that, there's a network effect. As more people use it, the deeper the cost savings come, because the organization as a whole is actually becoming a lot more efficient.
Excellent. So you let the numbers speak effectively.
Absolutely, Eric. Yeah.
And one other question, say, what is the key thing you can say, or the one thing even that sets you apart from other similar technologies that are available?
That's another great question. I mean, I would say that it's this concept of enablement and orchestration to be able to remove those shadow systems and those point solutions, and then to be able to complement and sharpen their core enterprise system. Like, that's where we play. That's our game, because no one else is really playing it. Because the value that we've seen from our clients is in actually removing all of those peripheral systems, which are so inefficient, and all of the implications. Then, as I said, dollarize, we assign the value to that, which then establishes the real world value. And it becomes very clear to our clients, there's a very real cost of not acting, doing nothing and sticking with these spreadsheets and these shadow systems and the point solutions and the constant meetings and the paperwork and the workarounds. it's actually risky. And as we're in this world we're in right now, it's very, very important for us to be able to make sure that we're very cost conscious. Nobody wants to buy another system. And that's what's interesting about TRUApp, is that it's a system that removes the other system. So you're not buying another tool. You are purchasing a tool, but you're removing all of the tools and all of the associated direct and indirect costs with them. And when you look at things like licensing and implementation and training and support and maintenance, customization, integration and upgrade costs, coupled with all of the inefficiencies that those systems and the workarounds and redundancies, that's what makes us special. And as I said, it's that pretty simple, as is the way you're doing it today versus the 2B, what it looks like to have a TRUApp enabled oil field. And I would really encourage anyone that would like to learn more about that. I'm glad to have a call and just chat, and you can share a little bit about your challenges, and we can kind of roll up our sleeves and take a look and see if any of this makes sense within your particular situation.
Yeah, excellent, Michael. I suggest we end the webinar here. So thank you very much for this overview and for sharing the insights about your solution. And thank you very much. And thanks to all that attended today. The recording will be made available. And looking forward to seeing all of you when we have the next webinar, which is actually next week, presented actually by the technologycatalog.com team themselves, whereby we share a bit about our benchmarking data insights, as well as a couple of other improvements we've made. So thank you very much, and have a great evening or great rest of the day.
Eric, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for all that, attended. Please reach out if you have any questions. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.